from the portfolio holder, Councillor James Gibson Watt. We've got apologies from Rafe Devlin, Cabinet Member for a More Prosperous Powys, and Councillor Glyn Preston as well from Cabinet. We've got a couple of officer apologies. We've got the Chief Executive, Emma Palmer, and Karen Jenkins from the Education Service. I've no other apologies, Chair.
Just on the portfolio holder, the portfolio brought to me in the beginning of the week, and he'd got some school visits organised, which had been organised prior to our meeting. So I accepted his apologies, however difficult it makes it. But obviously, business as usual needs to continue. So thanks for that, Councillor James, for letting us know. Anybody aware of any other apologies at this point? No, if that's the case, then we'll accept all those apologies given at item 1. Item 2 on your agenda is declarations of interest. I don't think anybody will have a declaration, but an opportunity to give a declaration at 2. And also at 3, declaration of party whip. If there are any, please speak up. Judging on your silence, we move on to item 4, the minutes of our previous meeting held on the 11th of December. They've been circulated for perusal, and any comments in relation to accuracy? If not, I'm looking for a proposal for the accuracy of these meetings, which I can sign. Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you very much. Members, have anybody got any matters arising out of those minutes? If not, we move on to Cabinet responses to scrutiny recommendations. We have 3 lots, the 11th of December, 18th of December, and those of the 15th of January. Opportunity for anybody to delve into them. Any comments on what is accepted and what hasn't been accepted? Or any further items of business you wish to contribute to those? No, right. I'm good to say in this instance, thank you very much for all those responsible for getting these recommendations back to us. It's certainly an improvement, and we really do welcome this approach. So thank you for all of you who've been responsible for getting those recommendations back to us so quickly. And it's worth noting that one was the 15th of January, so swift work. Thank you. Item 6 on your agenda, the draft medium-term financial strategy 26-31, and also the draft budget of 26-27, and the capital programme for 26-31. Extensive documentations with this, and I know everybody will have an opportunity to read and peruse with them. But I'm going to go to Councillor David in the first instance, just for a brief overview, and then we'll go to officers for the document to give us a quick overview. So, Councillor David, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. As the Chair's mentioned, the pack in front of you today, the report you've got, I think they total about 260, 270 pages. Which is quite significant to say the least. I don't intend going through them all for obvious reasons, but I'll concentrate, if I may, as far as my introduction is concerned, on the budget report itself. That again is quite lengthy. So what I intend doing is just pulling out a few of the highlights. But obviously the purpose of our meeting this morning is to concentrate on the impact of the budget proposals and the way that they'll affect education within the county. And to that end, at the end of my short presentation, there will be a slide presentation which will be delivered by education officers. So the first part of the budget report really just looks at the economic climate on a national basis. It looks at the last November's Westminster budget, and then the second part actually looks at the Welsh Government budget and some notes on the Comments of Wales fiscal analysis looking ahead towards what might be potential impacts with regard to our medium-term financial strategy in the future. But what I'll do now, if I may, I'll just go straight to the 26-27 net budget requirements and just give you some highlights out of that just to set the scene. So the proposed draft net budget for 26-27 is £390.5 million. It supports inflationary and additional service cost pressures of over 35 million, as detailed in Appendix F of the report. With regard to schools across Powys continue to face significant financial pressure through pay, pension and other costs. The budget proposal includes additional funding of £5.6 million, that's 5.7%, directly into schools' delegated budgets, and £1.8 million, 9.4%, for education to support the improvements put in place following the Estin inspection of February last year. The funding of schools and education is above the level of increase received by the Council in AEF and reflects the priority education has from the Council. It provides the funding required to fully support the school's funding formula, ensuring that all schools receive sufficient funding to resource an appropriate educational provision to meet the obligations of the national curriculum. I'll now look at high-level cost reductions. The budget plan proposes to remove £12.3 million of savings from our budget next year. These are detailed in Appendix C of the report. In line with our Sustainable Powys principles, these reductions are focused on delivering services that are more efficient or that can be delivered at a reduced cost. Alternative sources of income and increased fees and charges have also been implemented. This limits the impact on the delivery of frontline services as much as possible within the financial constraints. If we look at council tax, proposing a 4.9% increase in council tax for 26-27 provides £5.66 million to bridge the gap. In proposing this increase, there's again been careful consideration to affordability for Powys residents, together with the ongoing need to meet increasing demand and inescapable cost pressures on vital local services upon which they rely. The full assessment is provided in the detailed impact assessment which supports this report. More than 53% of our residents will receive support to meet their council tax bills from exemptions and discounts and through eligibility from the council tax reduction scheme, which totals over £13 million for 26-27. Now look at the capital and treasury management strategies, which are fundamental to the effective delivery of the council's priorities and vision. The draft strategy document at Appendix H provides a high-level, long-term overview of how capital expenditure, capital financing and treasury management activity contribute to the provision of services, whilst considering the risks. However, these will be managed and the implications for future financial sustainability. With regard to reserves, the Council's reserves are key to our financial planning. Maintaining these at an appropriate level is central to our financial resilience and sustainability. They provide a safeguard against risk, unusual events and future financial pressures. In the context of the needs to maintain financial stability and flexibility moving forward, on the advice of the Section 151 officer, it's Cabinet's intention not to make any planned use of the General Reserve to fund the 26-27 budget. So finally, the revenue and capital budgets proposed today set out the financial resources within which the council services must operate during 25-26. Both budgets are aligned and ensure that our limited resources are prioritised to secure outcomes for our communities. I'll end my introduction there, Chair, and I think perhaps now we could, with your permission, move into the presentation, which I think officers are going to take us through. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor David, for that. I've got a quick overview because it's an incredible task with the enormity of the budget. I'm going to ask in the first instance, are there any questions for Councillor David at this point, or are you happy to continue into the officer's introduction? Okay, no indications. Who are we coming to? Dr. Richard?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Morning, everybody. Bore pawb. We've got a number of senior officers on the call from both education and finance. And what we intend to do is to take you through a high-level presentation which covers 4 areas. So we will cover school delegated, school improvement and learning, school transformation, and the capital programme. So, Chair, What I would propose, if this is appropriate for the committee, we will work through slide by slide, pausing after each slide then for the committee to scrutinise and challenge and pose questions. Are you happy with that approach?
Yeah, it gives us a bit of structure, doesn't it?
Great. Diolch yn fawr. Okay, James, would you share the slides, please?
Should be appearing shortly.
Okay, thank you. If you want to move on. Thank you. So we'll start with a summary slide for schools' delegated budgets. You'll note there that the base budget for schools delegated in 25-26 was approximately 98,303,000. The budget put forward for 26-27 sees an increase to just under 104 million, so 103,872,000, a 5.7% increase. We break down on this slide where that increase is made up. So you'll see just underneath the budget in red in the top left, inflationary pressures account for an additional 2.6 million. Those inflationary pressures relate to pay awards. There's an increase due to changes in demography, and the table below indicates what those changes are. So we have a reduction, as we know, coming in of learners coming into our mainstream settings, but we have that increase of ALN pressures and an increase in the number of pupils that need to attend our special schools. In terms of service pressures, there's an additional 3 million, and the table in the top right details what those service pressures are. So I'll just highlight some of the more substantial pressures as indicated in that table. So you'll see at the top the additional 4% for the Teachers' Pay Award. This is a national pay award that's been awarded to teachers across Wales, and that's accounting for £720,000 worth of the additional pressures. The committee will be familiar with the school funding formula paper and the proposed changes, and there's a £1 million pressure to support the proposals of that paper. There are also additional pressures relating to ALN, both local authority and school IDPs, and the review that is undertaken of the rates for those IDPs, and that accounts for £266,000 worth of the increased pressure. We have pupil number impact, which we have identified post the FRM at in both mainstream settings and our special school settings. So substantial amounts there of 256,368. As you work through the table, you'll see an increase in the ISR for special schools, the ISR being the leadership rates of pay. There's comment on utility pressures not being deflated in the way that we had previously estimated. Ongoing utility pressures, that additional cost for our secondary schools and exam inflation. You'll be familiar with the new GCSEs, which are being rolled out this year for Year 10 and Year 11 in line with Curriculum for Wales, and an additional 116,000 pressure for premises. We have proposed savings of approximately £500,000, and I'll turn to Nancy Owen in Finance just to explain how those savings are made up. Nancy.
Lovely, thank you, Richard. So the £500,000, the £500,000 savings in respect of the schools delegated are in relation to the review of the employer's pension contribution and the estimated impact of that reducing. So the funding formula principles that relate to the pension element would be reduced, but also the budgets set by individual schools themselves would also be reduced to reflect that reduction in the employer's contribution rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So, Chair, there's a summary there of schools' delegated budgets.
Okay, I'm opening up for questions, and if we can keep our questions to delegated budget, that would be good. And then we can pick up other things as we move on. Councillor Allard. Councillor Allard is upside down for me for some reason, but I don't know, is that the case for everybody?
Apologies, I'll turn my camera off. I've done something wrong, haven't I? Diolch, Cadeirydd. The overall budget for school delegated has gone up by 5.5 million. Number of pupils has fallen slightly. What for the various categories of schools, secondary, primary, and specials? How has the average funding per pupil changed between last year's budgets, current year's budget, and this proposed budget? Have you got the figures there? Just so we can see the effect of the changes in the.
Nancy's coming in, Allard.
Okay, brilliant.
Councillor Allard, I haven't got that calculated here, but it's something I can look at in the background as we go through the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Nancy.
Anything else, Allard?
Yeah, at some points, I wanted to discuss the impact of the funding formula, and there was a promise to run the figures through to see the impact on the individual schools. But it would be good to see that before the budget is finally voted on. I don't know if you got it today or not. Maybe some other councillors would want to pick up on that. Thank you.
This was something that we had spoke about in the previous, in the funding formula meeting. It's difficult to understand the impact on schools without knowing what the funding formula will mean to individual schools. Is that a possibility at some point? Jane, microphone, please.
Oh, it should be working.
It is now. Oh, you just switched yourself off. There we go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So we don't routinely share the impact across individual schools. When we make changes to the formula, we do deliver that with principles against each of the elements within the formula. And that is because ultimately any change in the formula does give winners and losers. So it's really important for changes to be considered at that principle level. The report that was presented to Cabinet does give an indication of how it impacts across each sector. But our remit in the past has always been not to share the detail of that. Obviously, as officers, we look at that. And we do understand the impact on each individual school, and will have looked at that as part of our review. But as I said, in the past, we have not shared that detail because I think that can skew people away from really focusing on the principles of what the formula is trying to achieve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Allard's coming back.
I'd be quite happy to take it in confidential session if that's. Because I've got to say, in the past, I've been involved in redoing funding formulas 5 years ago when we had specialists in. And I at that point, I had a sort of thought that it favoured primary schools too much. And I was given assurance by officers that it didn't. But subsequently, clearly it did. So without knowing the actual figures, it's really difficult to make an assessment on the level of funding that's going into schools. Thank you.
Tend to agree with you there, Councillor Allard. Councillor Lucy.
Sorry, I had my microphone off. Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask the same question as Allard around the funding formulas, because it is very difficult to understand how individual schools will be impacted and therefore whether they are likely to be able to stick within their budgets. But there are plenty of other questions that we've got. And one was around ALN and the fact that if a child needs one-to-one support, will there be adequate funding for that so that the rest of the school budget isn't impacted, so that other children aren't affected in a negative way?
Who's picking up on that? Judith.
Bore da. Thank you, Councillor Lucy. Oh, Sorry. We're talking about the unit measures for individual children, and that's something we have planned to look at going forward as part of the funding formula to ensure that we have a more accurate picture about what that level of funding needs are across the school, because it's not always one child in one setting, and we have to look at the whole picture across all the whole cohort within a school as well. So that is something that we are going to look at moving forward, Councillor Lucy.
Thank you. I think we do have big concerns around that, you know, it's all very well to look at it in the round, but having one or two children who need significant care could have a huge impact on the school's budget overall. Thank
Yeah.
you. I'll come back with other questions.
Thanks, Lucy. Councillor Gareth. E.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say, just following on from Lucy's point, my understanding the local authority IDP funding at the moment is just over £7,000 in the primary sector. What is that expected to go up? Is in my head £7,000 and he buys you 5 or 6 hours per week, but that wasn't my main question. I note in the papers that section 3.15 it mentions the revaluation of NNDR. And I just want, and there's no mention in the school's pressures or sounds anything about the change of NNDR. I just wanted his officers know what the impact that's going to be as from the 1st of April. Another question, just to clarify the point Nancy made about the change in pensions rate, that is just the local government pensions. Do we know what's happening with the teachers' pension scheme? Any change to that rate?
Nancy?
Can I come in on a couple of points there, Chair? Is that all right?
You weren't answering Gareth there, no?
Yeah, well, I did have one for Councillor Lucy, if that's okay at some point, but I can take Councillor just to complement Judith's point about ALN and add to it. There is also, Councillor Lucy, we've got an ALN retained element to our delegated budget for ALN, which is kept for emergency situations as well. So we need to review that now with Judith as head of service, with all the ALN elements. So just to add to that, and that's obviously included in the FRM around the line under demography. In respect to Councillor Gareth, in terms of the IDP rates, Councillor Gareth, you note on the slide there was a line that Richard referred to around the 266,000. What that is doing is putting back in the rates that we had to reduce following the running of the formula from last year. So it's increasing those rates back up to £8,300 to just under 2.5, and then ULP's around 155, and then we've got inflation built in the formula for those rates, coupled with the amount of money that we've recognised against the 600,000 as well. So that's where we are with the rates at the moment, but obviously we will finalise those once we've run the formula. And we will then, in our description of the funding formula, and it's not just for primary, it's the same for secondary and all age, the rates are the same across those sectors. We will publish in our description the amended rates, but taking on board the committee's previous points around the rates in general and working with Judith on that. And then in terms of the NNDR and the rates, we have got nothing in the actual slide here. However, once the review has been finalised, we have included an element under risk around the rates changes as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we back, Councillor Gareth?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bryn, Borda.
Cwestiwn ynglyn â'r terminoleg mwy na'n byd arall ydy hwn. Mae'r slides yn cyfeirio at cyllid sydd wedi dirprwyo i ysgolion. Nawr, ga i just checio, mae hwnna wedi dirprwyo gan y cyngor i'r adran addysg ydy hwn, nid be mae'r adran addysg yn dirprwyo i'r ysgolion. Ydw i'n gywir? Oes na neu ydy'r cyllid ar gyfer gwariant canolog gan adran addysg ar wahân i hwn?
There's a few frowns there, Bryn, so I'm not sure they're understanding your question. Has anybody, Marianne?
I think Nancy was going to come in just
Oh,
before.
sorry, Nancy and then Marianne.
Yeah, so in terms of the slide in front of us, this makes up the whole of the school's delegated budget, Councillor Bryn. So
Yeah.
obviously we've got an agreed formula and we fund a formula on those principles.
Yeah, can I just check? Is it this is delegated to the education department, not delegated to schools entirely?
No, it's all delegated to schools.
So there's another batch of money we haven't seen yet, which has been part of the central.
Yeah, centrally.
That's all I wanted to know.
Okay.
Diolch, Bryn. Margaret, welcome. You've been having mega problems in the last few meetings, so you're up and running.
Yes, well, which is why the question may be totally irrelevant. But I'm very concerned with ALN, obviously, as most people are, and that we're supporting children adequately. And I don't know what the papers show because I haven't been able to access them at all. But now, thankfully, I'm in the office in Ladywell House in Newtown, and I can see, but I haven't had time or the opportunity to look at things properly. But I'm concerned particularly that with ALN, that we have information about the youngest children who are receiving in mainstream schools support, because I know secondary is a major concern, but are we supporting children adequately at the early stages when we're aware that there is some problem? Because I just think that maybe that would save problems later on if they were adequately funded and supported at the very early stage when problems were identified. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. It's a common point that we've made on many occasions. Judith, I know you've got a hand. We're just looking for sustainability, and that the budget isn't just providing those short-term outcomes. We're looking for sustainability right across the board. Judith.
Diolch yn fawr. Yes, Margaret, this is something that we have identified this year, and we've put a pressure on the FRM for early years specific ALN needs. There are a number of children, the need is increasing. We're identifying children's needs earlier. We have an early years team led by an early years Elenco, which supports in the mainstream settings at the moment. But we've also now identified that we have children with higher level needs who need something more bespoke and specific. So that's a pressure we've put on the FRM, which will come up, I think, in the next slide, to be able to meet the needs of those children. Something we're very, very aware of. Thank you.
Irig's coming in as well, Margaret.
Yeah, just to completely agree with Margaret's point there about, early identification and the need to support those learners earlier will help us then in the long term. So we don't want to get to secondary school and try to deal with the issue there. We need to be dealing with their issues and their needs and support those needs as soon as possible so we can address them. So we do agree with what Margaret was saying there about early identification and support. And that's what we're trying to do with our early years and also into the early years of primary education as well. So,
you wish to come back, Margaret?
No, that's fine. And maybe to see some figures or whatever at some stage would be helpful, of numbers or whatever. Is there an increase in the age group needing support, etc., etc.?
Sorry, Councillor Gwynfor, could I just come back in to answer that? Yes. Yes, there is, Margaret. As you're probably aware, children in the early years have LAIDPs if they have an identified ALN. and that figure has increased from 7 last year to 23 this year. So there is a significant increase, but we are adapting our support to meet that need and identifying that we do need to put in extra support for those children with higher level needs. We have an early years PIP panel that runs, which is a multi-agency panel consisting of children's services, health, sensory service, EP service, early years service, who all meet regularly to discuss the needs of these children and way forwards for each one individually. So we have put systems in place which are multi-agency focused, because we are very aware that we need early identification is crucial, and we need to meet the needs of those children at a very early age.
Thank you, Judith. We return to Councillor Garrity.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The first point I'm going to make is one for clarification, really. If you look at Table 5, it looks as though the school's delegated budget is not getting an increase that is at or near the average, but once you adjust for the pensions change, then actually it's not a 5.7% in buying power, it's a 6.2% increase in buying power. The question I was going to ask is one for Nancy. At last week's meeting on the schools delegated, we were told that the increase in the second sector delegation on the new formula would be 1.8 million. And I was just wondering if Nancy could, and there's only £1 million put here in this table, could Nancy or somebody else explain how the other £800,000 is going to be funded?
Can I come in there, Chair? Is that okay?
Yeah, come on, Nancy.
To be really clear with the school's delegated budget in front of us, where we have closed schools or made changes to alterations to schools where there has been a saving, that is put within the school's delegated budget under a closed schools account. Should we not use that during the year on our schools, that is delegated back out to schools at the year end. So the £500,000 in the formula paper is in relation to the schools delegated in respect of the school closures that we hold. And then, as it says in the section 151's comment and the resources section, that once we have finalised the formula, we anticipate the £300,000 to be met within the overall budget we hold for delegated, following finalisation of running the formula.
So what's the position, Nancy, if that £300,000 isn't available through the fund?
There has been an also provision, Councillor Gareth, under the risk budget of that amount.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I suppose one follow-up question, you said about the money held for the school closures. What is the total budget held at the moment, at the start of the year?
For 26-27, it is the £500,000.
It is exactly £500,000.
Yeah, and that is based on decisions that have already been made around school closures in full.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so just to develop that question a little bit further, so we've got an educating budget increase, which appears to be being consumed purely by pay and pension inflation and not directed to school improvement. Isn't this a worry for school, particularly those schools which have large deficits, or those schools who had their reserves depleted? That how are they going to continue in this instance with school improvement and outcomes? Is that you, Nancy, or not?
I was just going to come in on the finance element, but obviously Dr. Richard from the education side. But, you know, just to be clear in here, Councillor Gwynfer, there is a increase in here of £1 million in respect to the school's funding formula changes, coupled with £800,000 that is not within the funding formula at the moment, and that will have a positive impact on our secondary sector. And that is the same alongside the line underneath, the ALN LAIDP line of 266,000, which is a review of the local authorities' rates and increasing them back up to the original amount. And then, as Judith's touched on, a review that will need to happen potentially as Judith's work progresses with ALN in her role.
So you see that as extra. You don't see that as a cash flat settlement, and that is an extra investment beyond the pay and pension inflation gaps. Yeah.
It's an extra investment over and above
Okay.
what schools have got in their delegated budgets at the moment.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. Richard, your microphone, I'm afraid.
Sorry, Chair. Nancy's made the point about the additional investment. That additional investment, if we think about secondary, will allow our secondary schools to have class ratios of 1 to 20 at year 10 and 11, key stage 4. And, you know, the benefits of that smaller class size are well rehearsed. So there will be that opportunity for schools to have the right number of learners in front of specialist teachers. I think the point I'd like to make is, while we're talking about the budget here, it's also about all of the other school improvement functions across the service. So that's the engagement of our school improvement advisors with our schools to support them in the efficient use of their budgets, to make sure that we're directing resources to the areas of development that we need to direct them to in schools. And also that close work with curriculum and staffing planning and effective timetabling, which is a really key part about how schools use their delegated budgets. So I think there's a wider package of support around schools to drive school improvement, but there is additional money in this budget to support schools.
Okay, we'll leave that there. Some other councillors might react to that. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, sorry, can Dr. Richard just clarify that point he's made about reducing the average class size for year 10 and year 11? Because if that's going to be enacted, that's going to be from September. Therefore, the schools won't need that money until September, and they won't need that money for year 11 because they're not going to change the group sizes for year 10 going into year 11 for September. My understanding from information we had previously is that the schools are already got class sizes of under 20 on average. And I just want some clarity around that. And whether that's Dr. Richard or Sally, I don't know.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gareth. I'll come in there. The situation we've got at the moment is some of our schools are already operating at that average, and that's been putting the financial pressure on our schools. Some schools aren't operating at that average, but this will allow them to do that.
Yeah, thank you. That's the clarity I wanted. Thank you, Dr. Richard.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm going to come back to you, Dr. Richards, on the point you previously made. I'm concerned that, you know, let's accept we've got schools which are having difficulty making their budget, especially those with large deficits. And we've also got schools now who've had their reserves depleted. So, you know, there's quite a bit of financial shock out there. I'm just curious to know what early mechanisms are in place to identify schools which will, you know, may have financial challenges through the year, and how quick can we react to that? Nancy.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got very close working between the local authority and schools. So we have the team around the school approach, and that involves members of the finance team and now members of the school improvement team working with our heads and governing bodies with their school finances. So we have that really close contact. So we have those early warning conversations. We have that ongoing and regular monitoring and reporting of school budgets, so we can step in where appropriate and intervene, whether that to be bring challenge, which we have to do, or to be bringing the support that's required. You know, it's also worth noting that in that much more consistent approach, we're also exercising our statutory powers in a much more consistent fashion as well. And we have issued in the autumn term warning notices to schools as well. It's encouraging to say that those schools are working very well with us in terms of preparing their budget recovery plans, which is another example of how the authority is monitoring, tracking, stepping in where appropriate, and just keeping constant engagement with our schools. But you're right to point out it is a real challenge, hence why the need for that very close working.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. Councillor Aled.
Thank you, Gwynfor, and thank you, Richard. With what you just said, with that in mind, do you expect any, well, focus on secondary schools because there's a relatively small number of those compared to primary schools. Do you expect any of those to be in an unlicensed position when they present their draft budgets in May? Now that they've had this additional funding going into the secondary schools, do you expect any of those to have been in an unlicensed or budget position? Thank you.
Nancy.
Richard, did you want to come in there? Sorry.
Nancy, if you comment on the specifics of the schools that we're working with, I'll come in with an overview comment on that.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, I think, Councillor Aled, that on the whole, the money will help the situation in terms of the individual schools. However, we are still working with a couple of schools where I think it will be more challenging, and work is ongoing with those schools to review the position once we've got the total formula in place. Once we've run the formula in February and reviewed it with those individual schools, we've got ongoing work with a couple. But I think on the whole it will be positive, but it needs to be reviewed in line with how schools have set their budgets carefully and any challenges that are coming through in their overall budget plans. So we will need to review it. And, you know, there's other factors as well, alongside just a formula change. There will be individual stats with regards to ALN in school budgets as well, that will all form part of the final formula funding we provide to schools, as well as grant funding from Welsh Government. You know, we are seeing an increase at an all Wales level around the grants, and obviously that then is a national formula that's given to schools in respect of school standards, as an example. So I think there's quite a few things now that needs to formulate between the funding the authority gives and other income that the schools generate, and ensuring that they have got a robust budget plan going forward. Thank you.
I think, Chair, just to add to that, you know, we know that the majority of spend in our schools is on staffing. We've referenced before the work that's going on with schools to review curriculum, timetable, and the staffing need against that. Where, Councillor Aled, the challenge comes in is as we're doing that work and identifying with our schools where there could be further efficiencies, there's always a lag to deliver those efficiencies, because clearly the school needs to go through a management of change process in some cases, or in some cases there may be natural movement to allow them to reach the staff structures that they need to reach. So there's a degree of a lag between the work that we're doing with our schools and when we actually see them deliver the savings as a result of that work. So in that space, it's difficult to be conclusive around the budget position of a very small minority of our secondaries at the moment. But the point stands that we're working very closely with them. We're well cited on what they're doing, and they're reporting back to us regularly, and the SIA is engaged in it.
Yes, thank you. But when you talk about lag, there's been a team around the schools for a number of years now, going back a number of years. And those schools should be really, the business case around each school should be really well understood by the council. So I don't accept that there should be a lag in that process, because each school should be able to set an in-year balanced budget this year if there's adequate funding in the delegated. And that feeds through equitably to all schools. Thank you.
Richard, before you come in, Councillor Gareth put his hand up. Are you coming in on the back of this comment?
Yes.
Yes. So let's have Councillor Gareth, and then we'll come back to you, to Councillor Richard. Richard.
I would support Aled's point in terms of the secondary sector. You know, it's a £1.8 million injection into 13 sites. You know, we can all do our averages. That's in excess, you know, it's going to push in £150,000 per school on average. My concern, as I expressed last week in the formula, or the week before last, in the formula review, my concern is with those primary schools. And I welcome the fact that Dr. Richard and the cabinet members actually changed the phasing of the primary school implementation. But I still think a primary school, and if it's got a primary school is dropping from just above 60 to just below 60, they're going to have a hell of a shock in their budget when they get it in February. And and I think there's going to be those schools who won't have the time to actually put those changes in place. But we'll wait to see. And hopefully they might have got some reserves that they can actually use that to buffer that change.
I'm coming to you, Dr. Richards, to finalise this, and then we're going to move on to your next slide, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks so much. Councillor Ali's point, just to respond to that, I think the reality of the situation is we have not, in the past, had the level of analysis and depth of understanding of the curriculum structures, timetables and staffing allocations in our secondary schools that we now currently have. We now have deep dive reports which are an X-ray of that curriculum timetable and staffing relationship. We didn't have that previously. So we are now working with a new level of information. So we are bringing challenge to historic structures. We are bringing challenge to the way schools have been structured to make sure that they deliver the quality teaching and learning that they need to deliver. But we haven't been in that position before. So that's why I was using the phrase lag, because we're bringing a new level of information and a new level of challenge to schools, which schools are responding to.
Okay, is it? Come on, Gareth, do you want to come back?
No, I was just saying, Richard.
All right, thank you. I'm going to bring that at the end of the delegated budget, and we're going to move on to the next one, or we will run out of time. Dr. Richard, what was the next slide?
Okay, James, if you could move on. We are moving on to school improvement and learning.
Yeah, right, okay.
Okay, so I'll take you through it in the way that I did the first slide. So you'll see there that the base budget for school improvement and learning in 25-26 was nearly 16.5 million. The budget put forward for 26-27 at the bottom of the screen sees an increase to just over 17.5 million. In terms of the increase, the in-year changes that's based on, again, as with schools delegated, the inflationary pressures, 399,000 relating to pay. Growth demography is not applicable in this context. Service pressures, £836,000 worth of service pressures, which are detailed in the table on the right. And I'll just pull out some observations from that. So again, we've got the National Teachers Pay Award, 4% from September 2025. It's a 1% increase from what was budgeted. And just to remind colleagues that that is for our teachers in our PRU and specialist settings. Our independent out-of-county placements continues to see a pressure, and we've indicated there £100,000. We have a position where staff within the service in the ALN team were previously funded by grant, which they will no longer be. So there's a £239,000 pressure identified there. And I'll just turn to Marianne to comment on that, please, Marianne.
Yeah, the ALN staff were previously funded from the Capital Grant, the Sustainable Communities for Learning grant, as they were working on the development of capital projects, special schools, for example. So that is no longer the case, and therefore that's an additional pressure for us. When we go into further slides, I can talk to you about other staff that are also were also charged to the grants, and then we have to take that as a pressure as well. Diolch, Richard.
Thanks so much. If we move on, you'll be aware that there was a Welsh Government directive to increase the early years per child funding to £6.40. This happened after last year's FRM, so it's showing here as a £277,000 pressure. Speaking to Margaret's earlier point about that ALN demand for our youngest learners in the authority, there's 75,000 identified as a pressure for that increased ALN demand at early years. Then we have the pay inflation in relation to the independent out-of-county placements, 45,000, and pay inflation on payments to other local authorities where our learners are, and we've identified 16,000 pressure for that. In terms of savings, I'll turn to Judith in a minute, Head of ALN and Inclusion. We've discussed this previously, but we have a £50,000 saving identified for inter-authority placements for our learners. So, Jude, if I could turn to you, please, to put a bit more detail around that.
Yes, yeah. This is a saving we feel we can make. It's to be clear, it's not for independent placements out of county. Specifically for those children we are funding at school, IDP and LAIDP, who attend placements outside of Powys. And we feel that we can work, we've got a really good idea now of where children are taking up placements outside of the authority. And we feel that as a service, we can work closely with families who are choosing this option and make a saving in this respect.
Thank you, Judith.
Thanks, Chair. I'll come back to you now.
Thank you. Questions, members? Councillor Garrett is first up.
Yeah, just on that last point that Judith raised about the 50,000 inter-authority placements. So those are children that are currently in mainstream schools out of county. And I'm aware of some that have got local authority IDPs just over the border in Herefordshire.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to reduce those, make that saving, is either those children leave school and they come to the end of their primary or secondary phase, or we end the local authority IDP, or they come back to Powys. And can you give a breakdown of how that's going to be achieved? Because I don't think the third one's going to happen. The children aren't going to come back into Powys from the current out of authority placement unless it's linked to the closer to home work that social services are doing.
Yes, I think it's a combination, Gareth, if I'm honest. You know, we will look closely at the demography of these children, which year groups they're in, and how that's going to impact. We, like I said just previously, we're also looking at those families. There can be a link with out-of-county placements with children's services as well, and that's a work stream that I'm involved with. In addition, which is a very real situation across services. And then there's also the point that we are looking to avoid this situation moving forward as much as possible. Ultimately, it is a parental choice, so we can't dictate that. However, we will work closely with families to make sure that we have provision with children within our mainstream settings through, you know, an upskilling programme, training programme, and our whole inclusion agenda.
So are you happy with the risks being amber as it's shown on page 125 in the paper? To me, that's more, I know it's a small amount, it's only 50,000, but to me that sounds quite a high risk area.
I think we can not be entirely confident because, as I've alluded to, you know, it is a huge risk with parental choice, of course. But I think we have a real commitment to working with these families. There's not a huge amount of children. We're not speaking about a huge amount of children, so we can really drill down to look at where this is happening, and we have commitment to try and ensure that we keep as many children within our authority as possible.
Okay.
Chair, can I just step in there? I think Councillor Gareth's challenge is a really relevant one to us there, actually. I think that's something we should take back into the service, whether that should be rated red as a risk, given parental choice plays such a significant role in this saving. So I think that's something that we need to take back to the service and consider.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Richard, because I'm aware of some parents who've actually moved their children from a parish school to an out-of-county school, and they're not going to move them back. Even if you've got a gold-plated school, they could, as an option, they're not going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Aled.
Yeah, Gareth asked the question really, but I just want some idea of the size of that budget to put that 50k into perspective, because in the future years you've got another from the same area. Oh, I've lost it now. It's about another 75,000 coming out of the next 2 or 3 years as well, isn't that? So just the size of that budget, and also the the service pressure, the independent out of county. Can you give a little bit more information around that as well, John? The 45k in the
Come on, Nancy. Yep, come on, Nancy. Yeah, you're my
mute.
Apologies, sorry. The independent out-of-county placements, we've separated out really to show the learner-led element, so the 100 grand for the actual placement, and obviously then separated out pay inflation separately, Councillor Aled. So just trying to show things separately, really, in terms of actual placements and general inflation. In terms of the inter-authority budget, it's just over £500,000 for the payment element of the budget, the gross expenditure.
Okay, so relatively small percentage. I don't know if that's if I'm right in saying that. But can you explain the Can you explain the independent out of county pay inflation again? So whose pay?
So what we've done is we have included 2 lines in here. So one is in relation to an increase in placements and costs, which is the 100,000, which we had to bid for money previously for this area within year. And then the second element is inflation. So with independent out of county, as with inter-authority, you're having staff to look after the pupils. So we've increased the contract amounts that we're charged by those independent placements by a percentage to account for that.
Okay, I would have thought it was general inflation. The fact that you're stripping it back to pay inflation is anyway. That's fine. So what is the total budget on that one as well?
Just over 1.1 million.
1.1. Okay, Dr. Nancy.
Thank you, Margaret.
Yes, this is not. I haven't got budget figures for this, but you keep mentioning parents and the role of parents. And I'm just highlighting the fact that parents are a key to many things. And what are the things involved, what should be involved with working with parents from all aspects to support their children? And does it work with the allocated funding, etc., etc.? What is available?
Judith?
Thank you, Margaret. Working with parents is a huge part, as you know, of our role within the authority. We have caseworkers where children have LAIDPs who work extremely closely with parents in all aspects of their LAIDP and the provision they are getting, and are also involved with their review processes as well. We also have dotted across the authority family liaison officers who work very closely with parents and the families. Our EWOs would be involved in that as well. along with our inclusion managers within the service.
So one assumes parents are happy with that, and I have no problem with that. But because we're talking about children that are going out of county, they're not impacting the work being done with those parents, possibly, in reversing that decision.
Yeah, that is a point to be made. However, it does work both ways as well, Margaret. So as an authority, we also have children from cross borders who choose to come to our school for specific reasons. So yes, I do take your point on board.
Okay, Sarah's coming in to help, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to come off the back of what Judith was saying there, where there is a learner that may be in another local authority. We work multi-agency across the borders, linking that support together.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Judith. We could go to Garethy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies that I seem to be hogging the conversation this morning.
No, not at all.
Just two questions on two different areas. The £100,000 for independent out-of-county placements, is that for payments for children that are already out-of-county in placements, or is that for new children? The new learners going out of county? And if it's a second, why is the 100,000 all in 26, 27, and there's no part year effect in 27, 28? And the other question, Judith mentioned that we've also got children that we're educating that belong to other authorities. Why isn't there a savings line equivalent to the 16,000 inter-authority payments for those children? Because I assume we're going to increase our charges to those authorities. Well, how is that increase in charge being accounted for in this? Is that a slip up?
Nancy.
Can I come in on the last question, Chair, to start off with? So in terms of the inter-authority recruitment, obviously we've got an income budget, but what that does, Councillor Gareth, is it supports all the inter-authority payments as well, but also it supports the ALN retained element. So we will increase our rates, but obviously we'll have to take into account the reduction in the pension contribution as well, because we've got a detailed calculation which we share with our other local authorities around a charging schedule. But actually as well, there's also the link to the ALN retained as well. So at the moment, we've left it as it is following review of what we know now, with estimates of pupils that could stay going into secondary or could leave.
Right, so you recognise there's going to be an increase in income, but I don't understand how you're going to use that increase in income. How the service is going to use that increase in income.
The increase in income is on the different pay awards, which it's linked to, but also we've talked about in here then potentially the employers, the NJC element reducing of that, but there's also on top of that rate review, there's also the review like we've talked about here in terms of learners and assumptions around them and that recruitment continuing, and a link to the ALN retained element. So for example, the inter-authority element comes through that income line, as you know, but we have an ALN retained budget which supports schools. So the two are linked as well. And we see that during the financial year when we're recouping, but also the payments are going out of the ALN retained.
So are you saying, in effect, any increase in that income is going to support that be used to increase the support to the ALN retained that's paid to schools?
If required, yes. I'm happy that we've factored everything in we need at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Nance.
Thank you. Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. I think the last comment may have answered my question, but it was going back to something that Judith said about the increase in early years IDP pressures, and whether or not we think that the demand for that early years pressure budget is is realistic, or does it need to be higher, or would it lead to a knock-on implication for the school's delegated budgets for in those areas where those needs are? I don't know if somebody can give me some reassurance on that.
Anybody jumping in there?
Yes, I'll come in, Councillor Gwynfor. Yes, I think, Councillor Clare, we have actually looked at the numbers that we are predicting for this year, and we need to be aware that early years children aren't in school full time either, so that level of support is only over the hours that they are in their education hours. If they have wraparound care, support comes via other channels for them as well. So we are only looking to fund the support for the hours that they're in for education. So at the moment, I think it's a realistic figure. That's not to say we won't have to review, because as we know, demand is increasing all the time. So I'm sure in subsequent years we'll have to review that figure based on evaluations we do following this sum this year, because this is a new line for the authority. We really have identified those high-level needs this year, which hasn't happened previously. So we will do an evaluation of that as we go forward.
Thank you, Judith. Nancy also.
Yeah, just to come in on what Judith was saying as well, I think, we've made appropriate provision between the school's delegated budget, Councillor Clare, and school improvement and learning budget in front of you under our risk element as well around ALN demography in general. So that's a change for previous years in terms of the work we've done with Judith as head of service, and making sure that there is appropriate risk provision in because of the ALN elements to the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions, but I'm just going to make the point. Obviously, school improvement and learning is a key outcome in relation to following our REST inspection. How can we, as a scrutiny committee, be clear that the amount of proposed investment in school improvement is sufficient to deliver good outcomes? And with the absence of the portfolio holder today, I was just wondering what the cabinet will use to measure them outcomes, because this is a key to it. Councillor Peters jumping in.
Yeah, I think this is the position we were taking just before I changed portfolio. I think you'll recall, I think it was a question from Councillor Allard when we were looking at the strategic equality plan. And quite clearly there, we were looking at a profile around the schools that were in an Estin category coming out of a category, profiled over an 18-month period. And at that time, I made some predictions which we've seen materialise since then, with a number of schools moving position in a positive way. So there's two metrics really that we will be looking at. One is the improvement of schools when it comes to Estin inspections. And then secondly, which may be a slightly more lagging indicator, will be the outcomes at GCSE and A-level exams, because obviously there will be a slight lag there as pupils who are already in the system, who have been taught for several years under the pre-improvement situation, will work their way through the system and will increasingly benefit from the improvements we're putting in place. But I'm sure Dr. Richard will have some of the metrics that have been defined since I've left the portfolio that he's working with my successor.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Thanks so much, Chair. Yeah, so I think Councillor Roberts has mentioned some of the things. However, I think the key point I'd like to make is that as an education service, we now have clear KPIs in the corporate and strategic equality plan under Wellbeing Objective 3. we'll be familiar with those KPIs, and they are, in the majority of cases, based on quantitative data. Those KPIs cover the 3 to 16 continuum and hold us to account for the work which we've committed to delivering in the Education Integrated Business Plan. So that CSEP is holding us account, and Cabinet clearly using that CSEP to hold me and officers to account. Beyond those measures that are included in corporate planning, we will, as you are aware, in the Forward Work Programme, be bringing forward a school standards and performance report in February to the February 13th Scrutiny Committee. And that report, as well as looking at GCSE outcomes, post-16 outcomes, NEET data as an example, also brings forward the professional judgments from our school improvement advisors at primary level. So there will be strong comment on house-wide position of standards at primary. And then, of course, as mentioned by Councillor Roberts, we have that independent external inspection process through ESTIN, and obviously the outcomes of the inspections in our schools to calibrate the work that we are doing with externally. So I think there are very clear measures in terms of how we're being held to account, and those measures are threaded through the improvement planning of the council and the service.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Richard. That certainly gives me a certain amount of confidence in that answer, really. So thanks for that. Just one more question before we move on to the next slide. Marianne, you mentioned in relation to officers that were funded by grant in the ALM process. I was just interested to know how many posts does this involve? And you mentioned there's others later on, so it's a significant pressure. I was just wondering how many posts it actually would be.
In terms of the ALM staff, it's not purely just the number of posts, because we were funding elements of different officers. For example, we're funding our sensory officer to help support with the development of Robert Owen example. So roughly around five people were sort of allocated to this grant.
Right, and there'll be others later in the presentation.
There'll be others later, yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, Dr. Richards, let's move on. I do believe it's school transformation. Richard, your microphone.
So you'll have a break from me now, and I'll hand over to Marianne to take you through the next two slides.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, diolch. Yeah, so schools transformation, the title is a bit misleading because that's the way it's categorised. So this is really about a transformation plus the central services element of the service. So you can see here the base budget is 2.4 million, and the changes are in-year changes and the pressures are 9,000 inflationary. Service pressures 571, and the proposed savings no savings this year. So the pressures are as outlined on the slide there. Freedom Ledger contract inflation. So that was we estimated a shortfall last year, so that's been uplifted for this year. Transformation team again. So coming back down to staff, the transformation team was previously funded from the capital grant. And again, this is no longer the case. We did have an agreement with Welsh Government for a few years, but obviously that has now come to an end, and it is a pressure. Transformation can't happen without a whole range of staff to support it. Again, the same with the school's HR team. Again, a key part of transformation. Again, these were officers supported by capital, and again we have to reflect that this is now a pressure, and if we want to move on with our transformation programme, these officers are key. And last then but not least is the Trochi provision. So that's our immersion programme, intensive Welsh medium immersion provision. We get that's funded currently by a grant from Welsh Government. We now have two centres, one in Brookharington and one down in Brecon in Ysgol y Banau. And we see that as being key now to our plans around the West and developing a Welsh medium provision. So that's addressed, reflects the growing need to support those two centres. Okay, there we are. Okay.
Thanks, Marianne. Questions? Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, last year I thought within the budget for 26-27 there was a projected saving from revision of the Freedom Leisure contract for schools usage, and I thought you were doing a review of the swimming provision. I'm just wondering, it's not in this year's budget. I'm just wondering what's happened to it.
We did a piece of work with Freedom Leisure looking at the swimming offer. We've agreed a sum with Freedom around the school's swimming SLA. So that piece of work has already been done, and the schools have been notified of new hours for swimming provision.
So what was the net effect on the payment to Freedom?
It was just under 80,000 we agreed in the end.
What reduction?
Yeah.
So why isn't that shown as a saving in this year's budget?
I think it's shown in the community well-being, the leisure element. Okay.
But that's not a cost of leisures, it's a cost to the schools. It's a recharge to the schools, isn't it?
Nancy, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, not last year, in 25-26, the current year, there, as Councillor Gareth stated, was a savings element. That 80,000 is fulfilling that part of that element of the 265 on a permanent basis. Okay. So it wouldn't show in here.
Okay, so what's happened to the other 185,000 then? If there's a 265,000 saving last year was put into the budget, and there's an 80,000, there's a gap of 185,000 in my system.
There are other elements to it. I don't know. Mary is here. Mary, do you want to talk about the remaining detail around the school's SLA and the other elements around meeting that 265?
But that 265 was just in school service, wasn't it, Nancy?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll come in there. So there's also been some work with Freedom Leisure around how we structure it, and that has resulted in a saving in terms of the VAT element of the contract. So that's meeting the remainder of that saving.
Okay, thank you.
Content, Gareth?
I think so. Might need to have a further discussion with accountant to accountant, but yeah, happy at the moment. Okay,
Councillor Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in and ask about the transformation that we're seeing here, service pressures from transformation. Where would we expect to see savings to the service from the transformation process?
The savings are within the closed school fund and to support the delegated budget.
Can you remind me how much that was?
500,000, Nancy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep, nodding heads everywhere.
Okay, thank you. And also just a question about why the capital programmes changed significantly from last year.
Okay, there's another slide for capital. Do you want to just...
Okay, yeah, I'll wait for that.
I'll come to that, okay.
Okay, well, hang fire on that one. Councillor Allard.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see investment in trolley provision. Can I just ask, is it equally accessible to all children across Powys? This provision, will it help all children in all parts of Powys in their own communities, help them access Welsh medium education? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? So our strategy has been to look at 2 centres as a starting point. I would say that those centres are probably not accessible to all learners, but we do try and support our learners to get to these centres. So there's costs of travel and transport here as well. But the team then also support the learners back in their schools as well after they've been to the centres. I think if we had if we had all the resources we could have, then we would obviously expand the trolley provision across the county. But remember, we are also we've only started trolley a few years ago, so we're in this starting point, and moving to 2 centres is our first move. Going forward, we also need to consider how we bring in trolley pontio, so that's trolley for year 7. And especially as we're now moving into the position we have Welsh medium secondary schools coming on board. So that'll be another cost as we go forward as that provision develops.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Marianne. That's a little bit of a surprise to me when you mentioned transport. Trochi has been around for years and years and years. It tends to be turned off, turned on, turned off, depending on grants. So it's good to see that there's a constant provision there from Powys. But what element of that Trochi provision, 100k, do you expect to be swallowed up by transport?
Transport is funded separately, so we want to fund transport through the transformation funding, and obviously that is it is problematic to try and predict what the transport cost would be for Trochi, because you don't know where the pupils are going to come from, what the transport cost will be like. So that's something that is proving a tad difficult in terms of forecasting.
And for everybody else, where are the two centres?
Ysgol Bro Cerenion, Canolfan Maldwyn, and Canolfan Brycheiniog am Eisteddfod down in Ysgol y Banau in Brecon.
Diolch, Marianne. You muted, Chair, I think.
Chair, you're on mute.
How's
Chair?
that? How's
That's
that?
better. Yeah.
Right, so Councillor Bryn is next, who I'm sure is going to develop this argument. I've got to disappear to a knock at the door, and I'll come back, but if I'm not back before Councillor Bryn's finished, will please somebody follow on with answering that question, please. Thank you.
Okay, iawn. Diolch yn iawn. Mae'n debygol iawn bod cwestiwn fi mwy priodol ar gyfer y capital programme. Da ni wedi gweld y rhifau'n cael eu clusnodi ar gyfer datblygiadau adeiladau newydd. Dwi'n meddwl, mae wedi bod yn Llanfyllin yn y gorffennol lle diweddar, ond erbyn hyn, da ni'n gweld pres yn cael ei clusnodi ar gyfer datblygiadau yn Llanfair Cerenion. Oes modd esbonio mwy ar y ffigurau hynny da ni wedi gweld?
Oes. James, do you want to move forward to the next slide on capital? Lovely. Diolch, Cynghorydd Bryn. So just to explain, this is our capital profile now for the next 5 years. The first line is our Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, which are the big projects funded partly by Welsh Government, partly by the Council. That reflects our strategic outline programme, which was approved last year by Cabinet and the Welsh Government, which sets out our 9-year rolling programme. Councillor Bryn mentioned Llanfyllin. The sustainable, the SOP, the Sustainable Programme, it indicates the priorities over the next 3 bands, so a 3-year period. So first 3 years are the projects currently in different stages of design, and they include, just for everybody, Robert Owen completed last year, Bryn Llywarch moving on to start on site very soon, Senny Bridge Primary School, New Build, Ysgol Golwg Pen y Fan, tenders are in for that one. Ysgol Bro Hylgen will be out to tender very soon, and Ysgol Calon y Dderwen. So those are all in our first 3 years of the rolling programme. Second lot of the 3 years, so the, years 3 to 6, include Ysgol Bro Cerenion. Include Ysgol Bro Cerenion and other schools, and then at the latter stage of the 9-year rolling programme, we refer to Llanfyllin and the Llanfyllin Catchment Review, so they're in there. So nothing has changed. The programme is set out as it was set out last year and approved last year. The other line there, schools major improvements, that is our funding for maintaining our schools estate as much as we can. So that's around building condition. Also includes our site safeguarding work as well. So 4.1 next year, dropping down again. We will be reviewing this programme for next year based on the updated condition assessments that came through over the last year. Okay. Dwi'n nad i ateb y cwestiwn, Cynghorydd Bryn?
Ie, do I raddau, ond fyswn ni yn licio rhyw bryd wrach mae ddim dyma'r lle i gwneud o, ond deall y meddylfryd tu ôl i'r gwariantau yma. achos dwi'n yn siŵr ydy'r pres yn cael ei wario yn y ffordd orau hir dymor. Da ni'n gwybod bod yna, wel, byr dymor, mae gen ni issues efo poblogaethau ar gyfer ysgolion gwahanol yma, ac hefyd hygyrchedd yr ysgolion yma'n arbennig ar gyfer addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg sydd yn cael ei llethu i raddau helaeth iawn oherwydd daearyddiaeth Maldwyn fel ac yma hi ac yn debyg yn de'r sir hefyd. So, mae'n hen bryd i ni cael gweledigaeth tymor hir ar sut mae'r datblygu'r addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg yn yr ardaloedd hyn. Sorry, diolch.
Okay. Councillor Gareth's got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. You couldn't just go through those schools in the first stage because I didn't hear Llandrindod.
Well, let's go. Yes. So first stage, Robert Owen finished last year. Bryn Llywarch starting on site soon. Senny Bridge, Golwg Pen y Fan, Bro Hyfgen, and Calon Dderwen. So those are the ones already in train. The middle period, so the years 3 to 6 include Ysgol Calon Cymru. Sorry, I didn't mention Ysgol Calon Cymru. Ysgol Calon Cymru and Bro Cyrene.
So what do you call years 3 to 6?
So the programme started in 2024. So the 24, 25, 26 is the first stage of the rolling programme. Obviously, it is a flexible programme, so we move forward. It's not set in stone like Band A used to be and Band B used to be. So it is a flexible programme. So we put in for years 26 to 29 is Ysgol Calon Cymru, Ysgol Bro Cyrene.
Okay. Just linked to the capital. I still got a couple of questions about revenue, but we need to go back to them. But just linked to capital. That's about 245 million across those 5 years, which I think is somewhere between 4.7 and 5 million pounds per annum in revenue budget. And I think this may be a question for the cabinet members or Dr. Richard. Do you think that's affordable for the council? Because that's 4 to 5% on council tax for the next 40 years.
Can I come in there first before Richard? Is that all right?
Yeah, come on, Marianne.
Affordability of the capital programme is a key concern for everybody. We have to look at each project on a case-by-case basis, and we have rigorous business cases that come through where we have to test the affordability, the strategic fit, the economic value for money argument as well. So there is a rigorous checks and balances approach to our capital programme within the council and within Welsh Government. But we do have to think about what do we do if we don't invest? And I think that then is more of a pressure on our schools and more of a pressure on the council finances, because with that amount of funding, we will have to fund our schools purely from council money rather than taking advantage of the Welsh Government rates that we have. Jane, do you want to come in? See your hand up.
Go on, Jane.
Yes, please. And I think just to pick up on that, part of my role as a Section 151 officer is obviously to advise the council whether the plans are affordable. And I think in terms of much of our capital spend, I've highlighted that we still have significant gaps in our budget plan over 5 years, and noting that, some spend in a wise way is better than no spend. You have to factor in both elements. So there is a difficult conversation, I think, to be had over the next 5 years when we see what our funding looks like at a national level. Based on what we're anticipating, we may have to reflect on those plans. So we have to ensure that they are affordable and comply with the Prudential Code. So it's an ongoing review. And if we need to change or realign our plans, then that will be a consideration for council as we move through the next few years.
I suppose the dilemma is whether it provides long-term savings, revenue savings. No, I'm going to go. Councillor David first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say, I don't think it's right that we should equate capital expenditure and borrowing costs directly, and equate it to council tax impacts, because as Jane has just mentioned, there's an awful lot we don't know yet going forward. So as long as we manage and monitor our programme very, very, very carefully, I'm sure there are ways that we can deliver without actually impacting council tax in a major way. We don't know what future settlements are going to be like. We do know that interest rates are falling quite rapidly at the moment. So there's a number of things, capital receipts again, if we can actually accelerate that, that can mitigate some of the actual borrowing costs that would impact our revenue budget. But simply to equate it to an increase in council tax, I think is the wrong way of looking at it.
Councillor Gareth, do you want to come back?
No, I'm happy. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, then. I note you shaking your head before, Aled, but I'll ask you to hold your thunder, and I'll go to Councillor Lucy first.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the school major improvements. Where are we in terms of the updated condition assessments? Have they all been completed now? And therefore, could we have a more accurate projection for future years? How can we be sure that amount of money in the budget is actually anywhere near enough to fund the improvements that are needed just to keep the schools habitable?
Yeah, I'll come back on that one. So condition surveys have all been updated last year, and they have been shared with each of the schools now. The line there on school major improvements isn't sufficient to meet all the information that came through those condition assessments. So as I said, what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at the programme, the next 5 years of programme for the school's major improvements programme, and then looking at how much would be needed over the next few years to fund it. And I think we're looking probably, the 4.1 is okay. It'll allow us to do quite a bit next year, but as we go forward with those sums there, 2.5 and then falling to 1 million, nowhere near enough for what we need. Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Aled.
Thank you, Chair. It's really a worrying position around the capital, and I accept Section 151 officer talked about in the next 5 years we're going to have to take some major decisions. But I'm sorry, but major decisions have been taken here and now at the moment, and significant investment is being made in secondary schools that are below 300 pupil capacity, and in an ideal world, to deliver the curriculum, etc., you got to have a 600 number school, and there's an example, and the Section 151 officer did say it in the report. There's a significant cost for the next 40 years. Officers won't be here for the next 40 years, neither will I. But the council is going to run out of money. We've got to take the decisions now and make sure that they're sustainable now and not in the next five years. You can sell all the county farms and pay for all the current schools, but the council at the moment is going to run out of money, and it's got to take strategic decisions about where our secondary schools have to be for the long term. These investments are for 40 years. For the next, how many generations will go through those schools in that time, and it's really worrying. The example that the cabinet have just approved, I think it was a typical average cost per pupil for the next 40 years of, off the top of my head, but £3,600 for each pupil for every year for the next 40 years, just to pay for the new building. That's before the cost of the delivery of the education as well. And I'm afraid the cabinet, and there's some schemes coming down the track. We do not have that clear sight of the schemes coming down the track. Bro Caraignon was mentioned just now. There's nothing to say in the council paperwork at all that there's going to be a £50 million investment in Bro Caraignon. When was that decision made? There's no clarity around the decision making within the council. And when you look at we've all looked at the SWAY documents about the condition scoring. Well, it looks like some schools with poorer conditions are being pushed back to the back of the queue while investing in schools with better condition scores. So what is the evidence used to decide on the timescale of the delivery of these various projects? It's really worrying, the attitude of the Council's Cabinet at the moment to the capital investment programme. Thank you.
Marianne.
Yeah, diolch Aled. As I alluded to, the strategic outline programme approved last year sets out the vision and the projects for the next 9-10 years.
I'm sorry, Marianne. And under the line, there's no indication of levels of funding or anything. You referring back to May 2014, are you? I think.
2024.
Sorry, yeah, 2024. Yeah, sorry, I'm only a decade out.
Okay.
But there's absolutely no indication in that paper about the level of funding. It's just almost a small one line in a table about. It sounds more aspirational. Nothing, but no other detail. So when was that decision made to include that significant investment?
That decision was made last year. Okay, so let me just explain to you what the requirements of the strategic outline programme was. The first 3 years, more detail, because projects were in different stages of design, so we got more understanding of the costs. As we go down the years then on the 9-year rolling programme, it's high level indications of potential costs. So what we did was we looked at what would be the potential cost at that point in time, okay, of new builds. However, as we go through the programme and we start looking at each individual project on a case-by-case basis, it depends what that need would be. It may not be a new build. So what we have in our SOP is the maximum, it's a maximum amount. And we know as we go forward, we may need an extension in a school, or we may need to create an area school, or we may need to just refurbish a wing, or you know, so there's way, as we go through each individual project, we then refine what we need. So it's not a blanket new schools everywhere kind of approach once we get down into the detail and we start to do the feasibilities. So that's, so I hope that explains that. Okay.
Thank you. I just would like to know when the Cabinet took the decision to put that significant investment in that particular school. Where was that Cabinet decision?
Last year, 2024, year before.
And it quotes the numbers, does it?
Yes, the strategic outline programme is there. It's 107 million in total at that point in time.
Yes, global figures, not individual. It's the Cabinet that should be answering this, and I'm not 100% sure if the Cabinet is aware of the what's in that programme.
I think, Aled, you've made your point well, and I think it's a point that's shared by quite a few fellow councillors. I think Councillor Bryn may add to that now, so I'm going to go to Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, diolch yn iawn. Jyst i gwisgo het cyfrwng Cymraeg ar ymhen. Fel mae Aled wedi bod yn dweud, mae'r penderfyniadau yma'n bell gyrhaeddiol. Da ni yn sôn am buddsoddiadau sydd gangen gwasanaethu cymunedau ni am hanner canrif arall. Mae yn y pen draw, dydy un ysgol cyfrwng Cymraeg i wasanaethu holl ffordd o Llangurig i Llansilin ddim yn ymarferol. Mae angen edrych yn strategol ar ble ddylai'r ysgol, fys ni'n teulu bod angen 2 ysgol cyfrwng Cymraeg a wnaeth o ddim heb cynyddu'r nifer cyfanswm o ysgolion sydd yn bodoli eisoes yn y sir. Mae pawb yn gallu gwneud y sums a gweithio allan be dwi'n cyfeirio at. Ac mae angen i ni gweld cynllun sydd yn mynd i gwasanaethu dysgwyr cyfrwng Cymraeg, a mae cyfrwng Saesneg yn cael ei cyfro'n dda iawn, ond mae angen gwasanaethu cyfrwng Cymraeg o pen draw, pen uchaf, Dyffryn Hafren, i pennicha Dyffryn Efyrnwy ac at y ffin yn iawn. Ac cwestiwn haws i chi ateb, ddaru Marian cyfeirio yn gynt at bod yr angen enfawr i datblygu trochi pontio. Lle mae'r trochi pontio yma sydd gobeithio mynd i cael ei ddatblygu, yn mynd i cael ei ddatblygu? Ydy o yn pob canolfan sydd yn darparu addysg uwchradd Cymraeg, neu dim ond mewn un canolfan trochi? So, a fydd yna gefnogaeth i'r trochi pontio pan ddaw o, a does na ddim cyllid ar ei gyfer ar hyn o bryd, ond mae angen dod ar ffindio'r cyllid hwnnw ar gyfer trochi pontio. Dim mynd i ddigwydd yn yr ysgolion lle mae darpariaeth cyfrwng Cymraeg eisoes yn digwydd. So mae yna yn amlwg 3 neu 4 o ysgolion eraill yn y cwch hwnnw. Dyna'r cwestiwn. Diolch.
OK, na i jyst ateb hwnna. Ysgol Bro Corinion fydd y cyntaf i gychwyn trochi pontio. Gobeithio cychwyn blwyddyn pen yma, mae hyb blwyddyn yma, tymor o'r ha, ond mae'r cynlluniau jyst yn dechrau. Mae tipyn o waith ymchwil wedi bod yn mynd ymlaen gyda awdurdodau eraill ynglyn â sut mae'r trochi pontio'n digwydd, beth sy'n angen ar ei gyfer. Wedyn wrth gwrs, dyn ni'n symud i petai'r penderfyniad yn cael ei wneud ynglyn â Ysgol Calon Cymru a sefydlu ysgol newydd yn Llyfr y Muallt. Yn amlwg, mae trochi yn rhan hanfodol o hwnna, trochi pontio hefyd yn rhan hanfodol. Felly dyna'r weledigaeth bod ni yn darparu trochi pontio fel mae'n mynd yn ei flaen, ond eto, petai ni mewn sefyllfa lle gallwn ni gynnal trochi pontio yn bob un ysgol, lle mae yna ddarpariaeth cyfrwng Cymraeg, yna byddwn ni'n gallu gwneud, ond mae'r cyllid ddim yn cefnogi hynna ar hyn o bryd.
Ond i dyle trochi pontio cael ei gefnogi lle mae yna swm sylweddol eisoes o Gymru Cymraeg yn cael ei addysgu mewn ysgol, a lle mae yna alw wedi cael ei brofi amdano fo eisoes?
Byddwn ni'n cytuno fe hynna, petai ni'n gallu ei gefnogi.
Mae angen gweld lle mae'r criteria ar gyfer wneud y penderfyniadau yma yn eisiau bod yn fwy amlwg o'r rwsyd. Diolch.
Thank you. Thank you both there. Interesting discussion. Councillor Peat seems to be coming in to give a cabinet perspective.
Yeah, I was just coming in on the comments from Councillor Allard in respect of the capital programme, the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. That was a package that went through its full cabinet, CLT cabinet process, was debated consistently. It's a while ago. I'm pretty sure it came to scrutiny, but I wouldn't say hand on heart that it did, but I'm seeing Marianne nodding. So it is a package that has gone through the formal processes of the council. The near to development process programme, the stage 1 was fully costed at that point. And I believe from memory there was indicative costing for the phase 2, which would be the Calon Cymru Bro Corinion one. Bro Corinion was also mentioned in the school transformation paper when it was moved to Welsh medium, so there was input at that point. But I am slightly unclear at the moment what scrutiny are, what is being brought to scrutiny in respect to the suggestion that without saying it, perhaps we should be looking again at whether we go ahead with building one of our high schools. I wonder if Councillor Ali could clarify which school he's referring to when he talks about a school that we perhaps shouldn't be reconsidering and not moving forward with, which obviously would help Cabinet in their thoughts in considering what is coming out of this meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Peat. I don't think Councillor Allard has got the detail in relation to the individual schools, but I'm sure Councillor Allard's comments are in relation to the school estate, so not individual schools. Marianne.
Yeah, just thinking about affordability and coming back to that, and some of the comments made, really welcome comments from many councillors. What I'd like to mention is that we are we are aware of our demographics going forward. We're aware that we're forecasting 1,000 less pupils in our system within the next 5 years, 750 of them in the primary sector. We're also aware that we need to accelerate the transformation programme. So this is where I'm coming back and making the link with affordability. Obviously, as we need to improve our school buildings, but we also need to rationalise the school's estate in order for us to have a sustainable and resilient school sector. So that piece of work is happening now, just to give committee some assurance around reviewing our blueprint. So our blueprint sets out the end state of where we want to be based on a set of criteria. We're currently looking at that now in light of information about demographics, the condition assessments, etc. And what that also points to is, yes, we need to rationalise across the whole school's estate, but there'll come a point when we will need to invest in order to have enough places for pupils as well. So it's a little bit of a strange situation where we're forecasting a decrease in pupil numbers, which you would think increases surplus places, but in specific areas we're already full. So we can't just close schools and then those places are then reallocated across neighbouring schools. We're in some situations, in some specific areas, where that is already we're at capacity. So that is where the thinking is around, well, we'll need to build new spaces, build new area schools or extend schools. So that comes into the equation as well. Yeah, thank you.
Diolch, Marianne. Councillor Allard's coming back.
Diolch, and thank you for the reference to the blueprint. It would be great to see that at some point. I don't think we've seen it at the working group for the finance panel on the learning skills. We've asked for it, still haven't seen it. And in response to Councillor Peat, if you provided a more detailed capital programme for the next 10 years instead of these 1 or 2 lines with global figures, I'd be more than happy to comment afterwards. But quite frankly, I've been asking for a 10-year capital programme, haven't seen it. It's just not acceptable. Thank you.
Councillor Garth.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Can we come back to revenue and the overall medium-term financial plan and the 5-year period up to 2030? I was part of Health and Care scrutiny yesterday, and they've done quite a detailed development of pressures and potential savings over the next 5 years, which I don't see in this document today for the education service. You know, I feel it's very weak around the central projected savings and pressures over the next 5 years. I just thought I can understand from Judith's point of view for ALN, because Judith hasn't been with us long and needs time to build that up. But and I think that's going to be a significant pressure, because I think Judith is going to identify some real multi-million pound pressures that the council's got to face. I just wonder what sort of timeline are we looking at to have those figures put into the MTF, the medium-term financial plan for the next 4 to 5 years, because we are meant to be having a strategic overview this year, and I don't feel that this service has actually done that yet. But that's just my view.
Anybody stepping in with that one?
Yeah, Chair, I'm happy to step into that. Thank you, Councillor Gareth, for the challenge. We'll take that back. We will come back to the scrutiny committee with clarity around when we will be able to bring, as an outcome of the work that the head of service is doing now, not just identifying the need in the system, but also on the wave 3 work as well. And we'll be able to bring back with a date to the committee when we'll be able to share what that future financial modelling looks like. But the point that you made at the start, which is, first of all, we need to do the diagnostics, which we're currently doing in the system to understand it. For me, it is a key one.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Dr. Richard. I do agree with Councillor Gareth there, because there has to be a certain amount of modelling in place so that we can understand what this 5-year transition will be with the medium term. So Yeah, no, it's a good point raised.
It's interesting, Chair. Many of us are either chairs or vice chairs of governing bodies or on governing bodies, and Nancy and your team are rightly challenging us to make sure we've got a budget balance over a 3-year period. But we don't seem to be being applying the same strength of the challenge to ourselves when setting the overall council budget.
Yep, point well made. Good. Any other further points to be made today now? Any general comments? We've been through the 4 specific items today, but are there any general comments on the budget? There's been very little mention of Estin and the school improvements which they have suggested for the authority. Are we content that the budget allows us to make them improvements within the service? Questions such as that? Anything else?
Sorry, Chair, can I ask, the service had some significant additional funding provided during the summer, late spring, early summer last year. Is that still in the base budget for the central team? I can't think what the figure was now.
Nancy, can you help us with that?
The money, Councillor Gareth, that we had in Q1 and Q2 was in relation to early years, which now forms part of the in the FRM, and there was also elements in relation to education improvement around the support to schools, and that at the moment is coming from a reserve that was set aside at last year end.
Okay. And is that a reserve that is adequate to meet 26-27 demand in that budget as well?
From the costings that we've worked with the service at the moment, I don't know if Dr. Richard's there as well, it's sufficient for what's budgeted currently.
Okay. So when is that reserve going to come to an end? And if there is that level of support is required, we haven't got that in the MTFP for future years. Is that something we should be considering?
Think if I can
bring Richard in there.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Yeah, just to come in on that point. So, Chair raised the point about progress against the Estin recommendations, which we're all familiar with. I think we do have sufficient budget to make progress against those recommendations. The money which the additional funds that we received last year were for us to introduce key leadership roles in the service. But it's also about how we're working differently as a service beyond just the finances. So our teams are working better together. We are evaluating better so that we know our schools better. Our schools are planning for improvement better. I feel confident that we're using resource in the service more efficiently. Also, we have increasingly, but we're not there yet, the right people in the right roles. And we have brought a new level of professional learning offer to those people to make sure they can fulfill their roles. So I think the additional funding that the service had, we've used intelligently as part of restructuring the new roles. And actually, we're growing sustainable models for how we move forward. So I'm confident that particularly around the leadership at all levels, that we have the right capacity. In terms of our school improvement work with our schools, what we've actually realised is that there was quite a lot of wasted resource in the way that we were working. And Sally has worked as Head of School Improvement and Learning very hard to bring the Learning and Improvement team into one. So subject officers and SIAs working much closer in sync. So we're working better and we're working smarter. So I think there's a fundamental change there. There is a challenge around the long-term workforce planning, and we are working with HR at the moment around that, models of growing your own from within the service and growing your own in schools. In terms of the post-16 recommendation, we know that work has progressed in the engagement phase, and we're working closely with colleagues in economy at the moment to look at what the medium and long-term transformation offer is going to be. Again, as that work progresses, we will identify what sort of financial commitments going to be needed to deliver on that, as with ALN. Site safeguarding, you'll know that we've strengthened the corporate governance process around site safeguarding. We're far better sighted on the position of our schools, and there was additional funding to address all of the highest level site safeguarding concerns. We now track, we now monitor, we now intervene quicker, and aligned with that, we have provided professional learning to schools to make sure that risk assessments are in place for ongoing works or works such as rights of way that are that will naturally take a little bit longer to resolve. So I am confident that the resource that we've got is allowing us to improve, and we are improving. However, the post-16 work and the ALN work, there will need to be further financial considerations around that.
Thank you, Dr. Richards, for that clarity.
Yeah, I think I need to say I'm disappointed then that that's not been identified at some high level within the MTFS, personally, because, you know, as David would tell us, we've got a £28 million gap in 4 years' time, 5 years' time, well, at the end of 29-30, whatever year it is. And this is, and what you've just said, Dr. Richard, is only going to build onto that gap. You know, and I think, as I said, I think ALN is a major issue. You know, it's a major issue in England. You know, I've talked to somebody this last week in an English authority, and their cumulative deficit on their SEND budget is alarming. And it seems to be that we're controlling our spend at the risk of possibly not meeting all the children's needs in ALN.
You know, the observations you make are right. You know, you make observations there about England, same in Wales. You know, Welsh Government published a paper 2 to 3 months ago. It might be useful for me to circulate around the committee about the strain in the system. I think from memory, they're estimating an additional £49 million needing to be found to support local authorities to meet need. So, you know, Councillor Gareth,
can I say, Dr. Richard, that figure pales into insignificance when compared to a single authority that I've talked to in England. It is most likely almost at least double that per annum for a single authority.
Yeah.
You know, I think ALN is the iceberg that we're going to run into.
I think you're right. And I think the points you've made and the challenge you've brought about, you know, needing to accelerate Judith's work in order to be able to bring some future financial modelling in the MTFS is right. The one observation I will make as well, it's also about, and our school improvement teams are working closely with schools on this, it's also about improving that quality teaching and learning in mainstream settings so that we create those more inclusive schools as well. So, you know, interestingly, I just make that point because I don't want it to become an ALN problem. There is a linked issue around the quality of teaching and learning.
I 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Would projected demand be a better description of it, in which it takes out ALN? So we're not clear on the projected demand of our medium-term financial plan. We're not clear what that demand will be of the forthcoming years. Jane, I believe you're coming in to help us with finance here.
Yeah, just if I may, Chair, and I think it's important to note, isn't it? The 5-year plan is an indicative plan. It's a way forward, but it won't capture everything yet. Things will move and change as we move through each of those financial years. So we will see changes. So it is indicative and it's high level in that regard. But some of the discussions that we're having here are also fundamental at a national level, because that will help inform the level of funding that we get from Welsh Government through that period as well. You know, our early indications are as we've got them set out within the plan, but again, we will constantly reflect on that. And we know inflation has a constant impact on us as well. So I just want to highlight that fact that there will be flexibility and things will move as we move through that 5-year period.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Councillor Allard.
Thank you. And yes, the plans they never capture all the pressures, as Jane says, you know. And when you talk about 40 million, you know, you're talking about £2.5 million. 40 million across Wales equates to about two and a half million within Powys. So anything around that can have a dramatic effect on the MTFS. And I was glad Dr. Richard brought it back to the mainstream schools as well, about how it works within mainstream school and how we can support within mainstream schools, because it feels as though money is being diverted from mainstream schools sometimes to deal with children which are more easily possibly supported outside the system, which is unfortunate. It needs to be an inclusive sort of system here. When Richard also talking about teams, various teams, sometimes I was wondering which teams he was talking about, whether it's teams within the council and the senior management teams within schools. There has to be close working across all those. And my concern is that the senior teams within schools will be scrabbling around trying to have all their focus in trying to maintain a balanced budget and not completely focused on their main issue, which is standards within schools. And they're trying to do that in some circumstances in schools which are not acceptable for the teaching of the children in the 21st century schools. So there's a real issue around that, and the risk that the deficits is within the schools. I know it's a net position about £3 million, but the level of deficits altogether, it's much higher than that, because that the £3 million, I think it's 3.3, is a net position. The deficit level is much higher than that, and so it forms a real risk to the council when you balance that against the general reserve. I real concerns, and I've had them for a number of years. And to be honest, this budget doesn't really address those. I guess it's not going to make things worse, but it doesn't really address that improvements and that drive for improvement we need to see within our schools. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Councillor Lucina.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question about school transport. That's a significant cost to the authority. There's very little mention of it in the budget. We know that school transport costs are going up, but we wondered if it was possible to have a breakdown between mainstream, ALN and special school travel increases. And whether there's been full whether enough account has been taken of potential rises in cost as the transport is as the contracts are retendered.
Okay, can we get a quick comment on that? Councillor Jackie.
Discussed in the ERC scrutiny, it's part of the HTR budget, and yes, we do know what the pressures are, Councillor Lucy, and we did discuss the ALN pressures as well, which come forward. So it's all been discussed in the ERC. So it isn't actually part of the education scrutiny budget discussions.
No, I accept it's separate, but it's such an important linking factor.
It is, and I can assure you that we are having really strong, robust conversations now between the education team and the school transport team, especially around ALN. And since Judith Hickey has been imposed, I think we're really upping the game on that one and having proper conversations now to protect the children who do need the transport. So those who need specialist transport, we're trying to make sure that we deliver that in the best possible way, but also understanding what those extra costs might be, and they are quite extensive now.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Gareth, and then we're going to pick up everybody else in a means of conclusion, because we do got a bit more work to do on our agenda before 12:30. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, Councillor Jeff got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Jeff, I had seen your hand. Councillor Jeff, I'm going to take you first.
Thank you, Chair. Just my comments on the meeting that you asked for. Go back to the funding formula when we said there was winners and losers. To me, if we're admitting that they're losers, that means it's going to be detrimental to some of the learners. And I think Aled was absolutely spot on when he said about a confidential session. So run it through, so as we know, is it the rural schools that's going to lose out, primary schools, secondary schools, ALN pupils? or schools that had a deficit and come out of them. I'm absolutely like flabbergasted that people have voted on that and they don't know the full consequences of the decision. That's all I've got to say today, Chair.
Thanks, Jeff. That's a good contribution. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, can I just pick up on the point that Councillor Jackie's just made? Because in our pre-meeting, I questioned own to school transport, and Councillor Angela, who's the chair of ERC, said it wasn't discussed in their scrutiny meeting, and I've got issues around that, which I've just sent Mary an email about. So I may be wrong, but that's what Councillor Angela said to me, that own to school transport wasn't mentioned.
What I can confirm it was. If you'd like to have a look at the recording, you will see the discussion that was had there.
Okay, then I'll do that then, Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor David, I know you've been waiting some time now, but Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. Just some final comments from me, really. I've listened to.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, I've listened to the discussion with interest, but I'm disappointed because I want to look at this at a high level, because I accept there's been a lot of specifics mentioned, and I fully appreciate that. But I'm not an educationalist; I'm an economist. That's my background, and I think we seem to have missed the fact, that this authority next year is going to invest £5 million more into education. If you take that with last year's, which was £7 million, nearly £8 million, that's £13 million over 2 years invested in education. I've been a councillor now for 14 years, and I've never, ever seen that amount of money invested in education in this authority. So let's not lose sight of that fact. Because I hear all the time, oh, there's not enough money going into education. No wonder our schools are struggling, etc., etc., etc. Now, I want to start looking at the way we approach this budget at the very, very start. All services were asked to go out and produce independent integrated business plans. Those business plans represented what services needed financially to deliver the optimum level of that service going forward. We as a cabinet looked at all those, and in the case of education, we said, yes, we can afford to invest this money into education. We incorporate that into our budget, hence the increase you've got. But obviously, within that business plan, there were pressures, and you've seen those pressures today. And this money that's been invested has allowed the service to cover all those pressures, which ensures that the money that is going into the service will allow them to deliver the optimum. So I really don't understand this statement, whereas £5 million extra going into the dedicated schools budget doesn't lead to improvement. It should. It defies definition if it doesn't. What it would say to me is that there must still be structural problems. And as far as the service is concerned, they've gone out there, they've got the teams around the schools, etc., working very, very hard to identify these problems and put fixes in place. I do accept that there are issues, serious issues, around the deficits going forward. But what I will say in that regard, as far as most of those are in the secondary sector, and the new funding formula proposals do address the deficits in the secondary sector to a degree. Perhaps not as fast as we'd like, I accept that, but we are taking steps to ensure that we do address those deficits. So I think it's time we just accepted the fact that this cabinet is working very, very hard to support education in Powys. And to be quite frank, I'll say it, I've said it before, if anybody has got some better solution, then I'm all ears. I want to hear it. Because can we afford to keep investing this level of funding into education every year going forward? I don't know. Potentially, if we look at the MTFS, there's been concerns around the fact that there's not a lot of savings identified in there going forward. Hopefully, we won't need to. We don't know what the settlements are going to be going forward. A lot of the figures within the MTFS are provisional anyway, and they will change. But I just wanted to make that point, Chair, because this is significant investment into education in Powys. Thank you.
Thank you, Portfolio. I'm somewhat disappointed that you've made them comments because you're underestimating the role of scrutiny. The role of scrutiny is to help Cabinet, and you said you're looking for solutions. We're trying to achieve some solutions which may improve the education of our pupils in Powys. You as a Cabinet have depleted the reserves of those schools, and moving forward with your investment, we are looking to see if that is enough investment to suit the needs of education in Powys. And all we're doing today is trying to bring some solutions or bring to your attention where that may not be the case. We're trying to help the service, and we are not the decision makers. And the role of scrutiny is to point out to Cabinet or point out to officers any solutions or where indeed you're not meeting the needs of the improvement of education in Powys. Let's be frank, there is an awful lot of categorization of schools in Powys, and we're not in a place where we need to be. If that is in relation to the funding of the service or the school system, it is our role as scrutiny to point that out to Cabinet, and if we can influence Cabinet to do something better. So please don't underestimate what we're trying to do here today. We're trying to help. That's what we really are. And to have the negative approach by yourself in response to our comments today, I think is wrong. We have a role as scrutiny in this authority, and that's what we're trying to do. And I, as the chair of this committee, are content that we've made some really good points today and challenge so that we can improve the funding, the improvements and the outcomes for our schools. Councillor Bryn.
Could I just respond, Chair? Just very, very quickly.
Well, I don't want it. I
accept what you're saying there.
I
but
don't
obviously
think your comments have helped our
there's a
scrutiny
responsibility
process today.
there's a responsibility.
David, I've given you
as
the
a
opportunity
committee
to speak. I've got scrutiny members who are
to
wishing
put
to
in
speak.
recommendations.
Chairman,
what you want for improvement.
Councillor David, I've got scrutiny members that wish to speak, and I've got a timeline of 12:30. I've given you the opportunity to speak. You've been well versed on what you wanted to say, and I let you say it. I'm saying to you, I think you're underestimating the role of scrutiny. Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, diolch yn iawn. Yeah, I'll just say this in English, sorry. Yeah, there's £100 million going in this year. It's got equivalent sums have gone in year after year after year for over a century. And none of that of any significance has been invested in bilingual education, which is Welsh medium education. We have to beg, steal and borrow. There's a paltry sum of 100,000 being contributed to a trochi scheme, which will be located in 2 small areas. There are structural problems, and when we're trying to propose alternatives, obstacles are put in our way to prevent them being discussed, specifically in North Powys, to think that one school, which is 50 miles away from most pupils who might want to access Welsh media education, is not a solution. And the schemes that have been worked up are going to embed that system in stone for the next 50 years. We need a solution which helps kids from the east and the west of North Powys. Effectively, one school cannot do that, and earlier remarks were made that some schools are oversubscribed. The schools that are often oversubscribed are those who provide bilingual outcome education for those kids, and that's where the investment has not happened. And I don't know what you call, there are words to describe systems which prioritize English language education over bilingual outcome education. You can choose your own, but you're dead right. There are huge problems with the structural use of the money in Powys, but I don't think, well, I'm not sure the current cabinet is addressing them as quickly as I would like to see it happening.
Thank you, Bryn. Councillor, called you councillor then, Marianne. How dare me, Marianne?
Yes, I'm just going to respond to Councillor Bryn there, just to clarify. in 2020, we had no Welsh medium secondary schools in the council. Situation of that historical situation, as we all know. By now, we've got Ysgol Bro Hydgen transitioning to become a Welsh medium school, all-through school. We have Ysgol Bro Cerenion transitioning to become an all-through school, a Welsh medium all-through school. Already started in primary and then starting secondary in September. And then obviously Cabinet will be considering our third Welsh medium school in Builth, and that'll be coming to Cabinet in the next month. So I think in terms of our strategy, the West clearly states where we're headed. It clearly states what the target is that we need to achieve by 2032, and we have plans to achieve those targets. I just wanted to make sure that everybody's clear on that we are supporting investment in our Welsh medium schools. I agree with Councillor Bryn, more can be done, but we've got a strategy and we are implementing that strategy. Thanks. Diolch.
Diolch, Marianne. I'm going to Margaret now, and then I'm going to Dr. Richard, and then we're moving on to recommendations from this agenda item. Margaret, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Margaret.
Oh, that's okay. Yep. Just a comment. It's inevitable that we were going to have this sort of discussion because in Wales, we've only just devolved ALN funding to schools. And it was inevitable that we were going to have, we have got to review a scrutiny very carefully and identify the information we need to as we go forward. And it's going to have to be looked at very, very closely over to ensure that we are meeting all the requirements and supporting our children adequately. And that's where we're at. And that's why we've got so many questions at this moment and we're looking at it so closely. And I think scrutiny is doing its work that it needs to do.
Thank you, Margaret. It's a good conclusion there, and I'm going to go to Dr. Richard now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. I just wanted to make the observation that the investments that our council is making in schools, and there is an increase in that investment, is making a difference in schools. I say that with a degree of caution because we're in the foothills of improvement, but we can see it across our system. Not for all groups of learners consistently. We know that there are still groups of learners that we are letting down in certain settings. But when we scan the system, what we are starting to see, and I emphasize starting to see, we are starting to see, because we've got a better knowledge of our schools, where our schools are beginning to improve. We're starting to see a very subtle change in the ESTIN profile of our schools. So there is improvement happening in the system, and I need to say that because not just the education service, but school leaders, teachers, every member of school communities are working hard, as are our governing bodies. For me, there is additional funding going into schools, but it is about how we use that funding with schools and how we're alongside schools to make sure that it targets the right areas. And it fundamentally comes back to, are our schools evaluating properly so that they understand their strengths and areas for development? Are our school improvement advisors in our schools looking at first-hand evidence of teaching and learning and leadership and standards? And then if our school improvement advisors are doing their job and schools are doing a thorough job, we have improvement planning at school level, which identifies the areas that schools need to target to have maximum impact on learner outcomes. And then the additional resource we're putting into schools is allocated to those areas. So I wanted to make the point that the money is one thing, but it's actually how we support schools and challenge schools to use it to maximum effect. And we're increasingly seeing especially at secondary sector, because that's where it tends to be a little bit more obvious. We're increasingly seeing our schools do that. So it's a pretty broad point, but I think it's one that I wanted to make. Thank you.
I think it's a broad point that's very well received, Dr. Richards, and believe me that and there's some comment going in the chat now, and comment we make as individual comment in our own little conversations, etc. We can see this improvement. We really can, and we can see that the officers are really trying to grasp this situation. We can see that improvement. We can hear the conversation from school. So yes, please, that broad point that you made is accepted by us all, and we want to continue to help that. Today's meeting is about that resource for that improvement. It's always a difficult meeting because it's a budget meeting, and we always want more. But if we can identify something which can help you in that journey, we really want to. Councillor Peter, I did say that Dr. Richards was the last point. I'm going to move on to the next agenda item. Sorry, it always becomes the case these days that we're up against time, and we need to get some recommendations formulated so that they can be sent over to the relevant people before the cabinet have a discussion in relation to, or into our full council in relation to the budget. So item 7 on the agenda, committee recommendations to cabinet. We've had a long discussion, and undoubtedly there will be some. So if we have some suggestions, I've made a few notes, and I know Kath has helped me there as well. So if you've got any recommendations, please. The one that springs to mind is in relation to putting the funding formula into action and what the implications they make on those individual schools. Do we want to make something in surrounding that? Yeah? Please speak up, members. Councillor Lucy. You're trying, Councillor Lucy.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, I agreed with you, but also we talked about the risk of not getting ALN children back into the county, so that saving may not be achieved. And we also talked about the fact that there was nowhere near enough money in the budget for the next 5 years for school improvements, capital improvements.
So a recommendation there, review sustainability of ALN funding, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, that was specifically looking at getting children back into county, wasn't it? And whether parents would actually agree to that.
Okay, yeah, no,
so the
that's
saving
good.
there might not be what we anticipate.
So we'll add to that then one-to-one unit rates, etc., which we discussed about, and
Yeah,
also
just
early
linking,
years.
yeah,
Go on,
just
Gareth.
linking to that, Chair, we also discussed whether that one should be moved from an amber to a red. I think Dr. Richard said
Yeah.
that was an option.
Yeah, and also the comment in relation to early years funding. We accepted the journey we were on there, so but we can still strengthen that with some recommendations. So the funding formula transparency.
Yeah.
Per pupil funding breakdown.
Yeah, Councillor. Oh, I'm going to say Councillor Jeff did have his hand up, Chair, but he's now.
Oh, go on.
He's now taking it down.
It was just to say the funding form there, what Gwynfor just said then, just make sure we run it through so as we can see the impact on schools. So that'll be my recommendation.
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Allen.
Yes, it's around that. Nancy did say she'd come back during the meeting with the average, unless it was after the meeting, I'm not sure. Nancy, thank you.
Well, we can put that as a recommendation then, yeah, per pupil funding breakdown. Yeah.
Yes, it's just I appreciate what Councillor Thomas was saying about additional money, but it's that balance between additional pressures as well, and it's the net effect on the schools we really want to see, and without seeing that, whether it's in confidential session or not, whether you see that money flow through the funding formula and to see the impact on the in-year balances for the schools. So yeah, no, that's all I want to see. Nothing.
Yeah, no, Alan, it's a great point, and it's not just us as a scrutiny committee would like to see sight of that. We would recommend the cabinet make their decisions on the site of that document as well, wouldn't it?
And the 10-year programme as well, capital programme. I'm pretty certain most councillors aren't aware of the detail within their capital programme, a detailed breakdown. I know Cabinet in my day were reluctant to publish it as well, but I'd like to see a far more detailed capital programme.
Thank you. Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. Linked to the capital programme element, really, in terms of where we are with the condition surveys for all the schools and whether or not the forecasted figures over the medium to longer term are likely to be, are we on target to do all the improvements? Have they been done already? Are we on track budget-wise to meet all those improvements that are needed? It seems to me that the projected budget figures for major improvements to existing school buildings, the numbers seem quite relatively low compared to obviously the potential for new builds, but obviously there's going to be a lot of schools that are deteriorating, have deteriorated, and where we are with that.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, just can we congratulate the decision to put £100,000 into Trochi. I think this is the first time ever for Powys County Council ever to invest in Trochi, invest its own money in the Trochi experience for our young people.
We'll certainly note that, Bryn.
Yeah, and but would it be possible to have some get some more feedback on where we see the long-term location of Welsh medium schools in Powys, so that we can understand where the investments should take place, either in buildings or in future Trochi Pontio provision?
Strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. What else have we got? We had some discussion about the delegated budget increase, the difference between the 1.8 million increase and the 1 million shown in the tables. Do we need some clarity on that?
No,
Judging your
I
side.
think Nancy explained that quite well, Chair,
Okay.
where the 1.8 was coming from.
You're content on that then, Gareth, yeah?
I'm content on that. I was going to say we need something around ALN, and that we need to have a paper coming back from Judith at some stage around the longer term strategy and an identification of what we need to spend in an ideal world, taking on board what Dr. Richard said about, it is about working together with the schools, etc., and changing their strategy. But there's something around that, because I am fearful of that one.
Okay, we can add that. Do we need to ask, I'm a bit concerned about, it was answered on the day in relation to the mechanisms in place to support those schools. So do we need to recommend that the team around the school is very clear where schools are performing, so that there can be some early intervention if this budget isn't sufficient? Yeah,
I agree with that one, Chair. And just linked to that, I think we need to have clarity of what support is available around the team around the school, in both secondary and primary. I think there's more work done in secondary than is in primary.
Okay. Yep. No, that's right. We'd like to see sight of the curriculum timetable deep dive work with it. Is that a recommendation that would help us in our plannings or our discussions? I'm just picking things out of my notes. Please speak up if you think yes or no. No, happy with what we've got. And then if you're happy, Councillor Lucy and myself and Kath will sit down and review the notes and see if there are other recommendations there as well. Okay, you've all gone very quiet. Item 8 on your agenda then is our work programme. So there's space on February the 13th, our next meeting, if there is an alternative budget. At this point, we don't know. We've got school standards improvement, stage 4-5 outcomes, Ascot Caled Cymru objection report, and also the attendance and exclusion report. We've got nothing in our, we've got self-assessment on March the 9th. Yippee, we all love that. And then we move on to the March the 4th meeting, transformation, and in red, Prestine catchment review, as we're not sure on that as yet. Comments, additions?
I think that's March the 19th meeting, isn't it, Gwynfor? I don't know where that falls.
I read it wrong there then. March the 19th, sorry. Yeah, Claire.
Yeah, can I just ask if that update on transformation is going to include where we are on post 16, please?
Marianne's nodding her head.
March 19th, yeah? Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Richard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Chair. Just to say, on February the 13th, the School Standards and Improvement Report, we will also be bringing evaluations from our primary school improvement advisors. So it won't simply look at Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 outcomes. It'll actually be a much broader and deeper report than the title there suggests, which is in response to the committee's challenge to previous reports we've brought. So you'll see a new level of detail and analysis across the sector in that report. And the attendance and exclusion report is the autumn term deep dive into our attendance exclusion position again over the sector. So just to give a bit more detail around those.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Alice.
When I mention when we mention standards, I just want to make sure everyone understands it, including post 16 as well. We've had a budget debate here without hardly referencing post 16.
No, you're right.
And that is something that's really going to be on at the top of the agenda going forward. It's really must big issue for the next 12 months.
Yeah, no, it's a fair comment. Margaret.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the appropriate place to just mention it, but we're hearing an awful lot about children who are not being educated in school, who are at home educated. I just wondered if that needs to be somewhere in the back of our minds, because numbers are rising quite a lot in places, and I don't know what tabs we're keeping on it at the moment, but just raising that's all.
I know in previous meetings we have had this discussion, and I know, Margaret, you've missed these meetings, but you're absolutely right. It is rising. I'm not sure it's quite appropriate to bring it back to us again. Perhaps we need to put a timescale on that so that we can see whether there is
figures or what's happening. Yes.
Yeah. If you have a look at the previous meetings, Margaret, you'll see the trend there and the comments that were made. If you can access them, and I know you have great difficulty. I might take it on myself to send it over to you by email so that it helps you have a clearer understanding as well.
Yeah. But it isn't a key issue in lots of places. But you wouldn't expect it to be.
You're absolutely right to give us the heads up. It's certainly something we need to monitor. Kath.
Only to say, Chair, that post the pre-election period, the May meeting is going to be on post 16. So it does. So Marianne, that's for May, along with school site safeguarding. So
on that comment, Marianne, there'll be some firm proposals in that meeting. So it's very relevant that we know something in the March meeting, yeah, or not, or is that how you see it going?
Yeah, the March meeting will be presenting the findings of the engagement piece that we've just done. So that's starting to trickle out. So some really interesting findings coming through from learners and parents and school communities. So that'll be where we are, and we'll be updating you as well about the work we've done to date. Standards, the Councillor Aled mentioned post 16 standards. That's a key one. We're focusing on the short-term measures around that at the moment. So we'll give you that update then.
I know we've also spoken about, and again, I can't remember the gentleman who wrote back to me. We also spoke about a full council, a member development session on post 16 as well. When do we envisage that?
We did. There was a mix up with dates. I think we'll go back to the table and see where we are with that one.
Okay, that's fine. Claire, content with that? Yeah, judging on your silence.
Yes, sorry, I was nodding.
Okay, it is, we're 5 minutes over time, so we haven't done too bad, but thank you ever so much for everybody attending today. It's a good attendance, members and officers, and we thank you for your time. And hopefully with our recommendations, we can certainly see some help and assistance in the budget setting round. So thank you very much, everybody. As usual, if members wish to stay on for a short period of time, more than happy to do so.